The Passaic River is a mature surface river, approximately 80 miles long, in northern New Jersey in the United States. The river in its upper course flows in a highly circuitous route, meandering through the swamp lowlands between the ridge hills of rural and suburban northern New Jersey, called the Great Swamp, draining much of the northern portion of the state through its tributaries. In its lower portion, it flows through the most urbanized and industrialized areas of the state, including along downtown Newark. The lower river suffered from severe pollution and industrial abandonment in the 20th century. In April 2014, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced a $1.7 billion plan to remove 4.3 million cubic yards of toxic mud from the bottom of lower 8 miles of the river. It is considered one of the most polluted stretches of water in the nation and the project one of the largest cleanups ever undertaken. The Passaic rises in the center of Meandering in southern Morris County. It begins between Spring Hill and Hardscrabble Road, traveling northeast and crossing Corey Lane before entering the Buck Hill Tract Natural Area. At this point the river begins to generally flow south, through Morristown National Historical Park, and forms the boundary between Morris and Somerset counties. In its current path, it passes through the southeast edge and drains Lord Sterling Park, then along the western edge of the Great Swamp, which drains through several small tributaries including Black Brook. The river passes through Gorge in Millington and then turns abruptly northeast, flowing through the valley between Long Hill to the west and the second Watchung Mountain to the east. It forms the boundary between Morris and Union counties as it passes Berkeley Heights, New Providence, and Summit. Near Chatham it turns north, forming the boundary between Morris and Essex counties. It passes Livingston and Fairfield, where it flows through the Hatfield Swamp and is joined by the Rockaway River just after the Whippany River run into it. Southwest of Lincoln Park it passes through the Great Peace Meadows, where it turns abruptly eastward and is joined at two bridges by its major tributary, the Pompton River, then meandering through Little Falls, New Jersey as it drops over a fall, across some rapids, and under Passaic County Route 646 and an abandoned railroad trestle. The river flows northeast into the city of Paterson, where it drops over the Great Falls of the Passaic. On the north end of Paterson, it turns abruptly south, flowing between Paterson and Clifton on the west and Hawthorne, Fairlawn, Elmwood Park, Garfield on the east, next through the city of Clifton. At Elmwood Park it begins to form Dundee Lake, created by the Dundee Dam built in 1845. The river becomes navigable 2.5 miles downstream of the Dundee Dam at the 8th Street, Locust Avenue Bridge in Warlington, where the dredged Warlington Reach Channel begins. Proceeding beyond the Warlington Reach, the river remains navigable via a series of maintained channels to its final destination, Newark Bay. It passes Passaic, Clifton again, then Nutley and Belleville on the west. It flows past Rutherford, Lyndhurst, and North Arlington to the east. In its lowest reaches, it flows along the northeast portion of the city of Newark on the west, passing Kearney, East Newark, and Harrison, New Jersey on the eastern bank. Near downtown Newark it makes an abrupt easterly bend, then south around Dunband, joining the Hackensack River at the northern end of Newark Bay, a back bay of New York Harbor. History. Geology. The Passaic River formed as a result of drainage from a massive preglacial lake that formed in northern New Jersey at the end of the last ice age, approximately 13,000 years ago. That prehistoric lake is now known as Glacial Lake Passaic and was centered in the present lowland swamps of Morris County, forming because of a blockage of the normal drainage path. Eventually the lake level rose high enough that the water flowed out of a new outlet. The Passaic River found a new path to the ocean via the Millington Gorge and the Patterson Falls as the glacier that covered the area retreated northward and the lake drained. As a result, the river as we now know it was born. Native American weirs. Prior to European colonialization along the Passaic in the late 17th century, the valley was the territory of the Lenape groups now known as the Aquakanonk and Hackensack, who used the river for fishing. To that end they built weirs, or overflow dams, to create pools and where the fish could be trapped. Many of these archaeological sites are still present and, in some cases, in good condition. Economic development. The river was highly significant in the early industrial development of New Jersey. It provided a navigable route connected by canals to the Delaware River starting in the late 18th century. It also was an early source of hydropower at the Great Falls of the Passaic in Patterson, resulting in the early emergence of the area as the center of industrial mills. Pollution. Much of the lower river suffered severe pollution during the 19th and 20th centuries because of the development, although the health of the river has improved due to enactment of the 1972 Clean Water Act and other environmental legislation, and the decline of industry along the river. It still suffers from substantial degradation of water quality. The sediment at the mouth of the river near Newark Bay remains contaminated by such pollutants as dioxin. The dioxin was generated principally by the Diamond Shamrock chemical plant in Newark, as a waste product resulting from the production of the Agent Orange defoliation chemical used during the Vietnam War. The cleanup of the dioxin contamination on the bottom of the river is the subject of a major environmental lawsuit regarding the responsibility for the cleanup. In 2008, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency reached a settlement with Occidental Chemical Corporation and Tierra Solutions, Inc. to clean a portion of the polluted river. A New Jersey Superior Court judge, ruling in July and September 2011, stated that Occidental and Maxis Exergy Corporation are liable for remediation in other portions of the river. In 2013, several corporate defendants agreed to pay the state of New Jersey $130 million for ecological damages related to Passaic River pollution. However, it is unclear as to whether the state will actually use this money for clean-up efforts. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has issued notices banning commercial fishing and advising the general public that fish caught in the tidal Passaic River should not be eaten. In April 2014, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced a $1.7 billion plan to remove 4.3 million cubic yards of toxic mud from the bottom of lower 8 miles of the river. It is considered one of the most polluted stretches of water in the nation, and the project one biggest cleanups ever undertaken. Economic decline and resurgence. The decline of manufacturing on the lower river has left a post-industrial landscape of abandoned and disused factories and other facilities. In particular, the stretch of the river along downtown Newark came to be regarded in the later decades of the 20th century as particularly wretched. Starting in the 1990s, the lower river became the subject of federal and state urban restoration efforts, which have resulted in new construction along the riverfront, including a regional headquarters of the FBI. While there has been a decline in the industrial use of the river, recreational use has increased since the early 1990s. There has been a long tradition of high school rowing by Kearney, Belleville, and Nutley high schools, and, in 1990, The historic Newark Boat Club was revived, broadening participation in the sport of rowing on the Passaic River. In 1999, the Passaic River Rowing Association became the second rowing club along the banks of the lower Passaic River. Today, the rowing community is very active through the 2 rowing clubs and 10 high school crews that include Kearney, Belleville, Nutley, Don Bosco Prep, St. Peter's Preparatory School, Montclair, Ridgewood, Teaneck, Westfield, North Arlington, and St. Benedict's Prep. The Passaic River is also host to the annual Head of the Passaic Regatta that has been held since 2001. Commercial transport on the lower Passaic hasn't entirely died. On December 3, 2008, a barge was loaded with biodiesel at the former WAS terminals in Newark, now Passaic River Terminals. Innovation Fuels LLC, one of the terminal's tenants, has plans to continue to sell 2 barge loads a month of biodiesel to customers in Europe. This is the first commercial barge in the river in over 15 years, although they experienced some delays with the county drawbridges that have been neglected for years and had some problems with shoaling due to the lack of maintenance dredging. They remain undeterred, and the Passaic River represents the cheapest and most efficient method to ship the cargo to its customers. Vantage points. The Passaic River can be accessed via a number of county parks. One notable park is called Stanley Park between Summit and Chatham. Other parks along the river are located in Passaic County. As part of the ongoing Newark revitalization effort by the city government, parkland is proposed along the banks of the river. The Passaic River generally is free of industrialization until it reaches the Summit and Chatham border. The upper portion of the river, above Summit and Chatham, are more natural in appearance, and the river has more of a young river character in places. The middle portion of the river flows through natural marshlands and forested areas in Essex County, which are generally inaccessible, and then through heavily populated areas of Passaic County where it is accessible via parallel roads and parks. Lower portions of the river, south of Paterson, are wider, more industrialized, and more mature in nature. Kearney Riverbank Park and Riverbank Park in Newark both provide waterfront access. The banks of the lower few miles of the river mainly are industrialized. Flooding problems. The Passaic River is known for chronic flooding problems during periods of heavy rainfall as snow melt, especially where the Pompton River joins the Passaic River on the border of Fairfield, Lincoln Park, and Wayne. The 2 rivers form a sizable floodplain in this area. Building has been allowed in the floodplain, and during extreme weather events that occur on a fairly regular basis, homes and businesses in the floodplain become flooded. A plan has been proposed to build the massive 20-mile structure, the Passaic River Flood Tunnel, to divert the periodic flood waters southeastly into Newark Bay, thus relieving these flooding problems upstream. Some residents have accepted buyouts from the federal government while the concept of constructing a flood tunnel is debated. However, many residents still live within the floodplain, and flooding appears to be growing worse as the land in the Passaic River Basin continues to be developed. Little Falls River Gauge. The Little Falls River Gauge along the Passaic River is located just south of the junction with the Pompton River, in an area that frequently floods. Flood stage is 7 feet at this location. Floods on February 28, 1902. There was severe flooding of the river. On October 10, 1903, one of the worst floods on record happened. The water crest was 17.50 feet, and severe flooding of Little Falls, Paterson, as well as many other areas along the river. Other high crests were 12.91 feet on April 7, 1984, 11.88 feet on April 18, 2007, and 11.87 feet on March 16, 2010. On April 23, 2010, Governor Chris Christie issued an order creating the Passaic River Basin Flood Advisory Commission. In January 2011, a report was issued mentioning the 2010 flood, and the result was for municipalities to change the master plans and change local flood damage prevention ordinances, which would include such things as elevating structures, and to stop expansion into flood zones. The areas considered prone to continual flooding are Acid Brook, Buttermilk Falls, Haycock Brook, Marwa River, Massanucket Brook, Packanack Brook, Pequannock River, Plog Brook, Pompton River, Ramapo River, Third River, Oannock River and Wolf Creek. On August 30, 2011, there was another flood with a 14.19 feet crest. The flood control issue had been considered as far back as 1870, and there were studies in 1939, 1948, 1962, 1969, 1972, 1973, 1987 and 1995, with minimum results from report suggestions. Tributaries: First River, Second River, Watsasing River, Third River, Yatacor River, McDonald's Brook, Weasel Brook, Saddle River, Ho-Ho-Cuss Brook, Fleischer Brook, Lincrest Brook, Little Diamond Brook, Stevenson Brook, Goffler Brook, Deep Vol Brook, Mollyann Brook, Spring Brook, Squaw Brook, Slippery Rock Brook, Peckman River, Singock Brook, Deep Aval Brook, Pompton River, Pequannock River, Wannock River, Ramapo River, Marwa River, Rockaway River, Whippany River, Fowlerton's Brook, Spring Garden Brook, Slough Brook, Canoe Brook, Salt Brook, Corey's Brook, Dead River, Black Brook, Great Brook, Lone Taco Brook, Primrose Brook, Penn's Brook, Indian Grove Brook, Narkpunk Brook, Taylor Brook,